The day they walked into my clinic, I was examining a 4-year-old with chronic asthma. 5 years, 2 months, and 13 days had passed since I'd last seen them, but time hadn't dulled the knife twist in my gut when I heard his voice. My name is Harmony, and I'm the pediatric specialist who was abandoned by her husband while giving birth to their daughter. Sounds like a bad soap opera, right? But that's exactly what happened when Walker chose to run off with my best friend Lucia on what should have been the happiest day of my life. Dr. Benson? My nurse, Bianca, poked her head into the examination room. There's an urgent case waiting to see you. Just a moment, I said, finishing up with my young patient. Keep using the inhaler exactly as prescribed, Tommy. You're doing great. I gave him a high five and turned to his mother. Schedule a follow-up in 2 weeks, okay? As they left, Bianca lingered. Her face held that careful expression she wore when delivering bad news. Harmony, you should know. It's Walker and Lucia. The stethoscope nearly slipped from my neck. No, they're insisting on seeing you specifically. It's about their daughter. Their daughter, the replacement child, the one they'd had after Walker walked out on me and Zoe. My hands started trembling, but I forced them still. 5 years of building myself back up, of proving I was more than just the woman they'd betrayed, and now they had the audacity to come here? Tell them to find another doctor, I said, turning to my computer. They've tried. 3 other specialists have been unable to help. The child, Bianca hesitated. She's not doing well. I looked at the family photo on my desk. Me and Zoe at the park last summer, her wild curls matching mine, both of us laughing. My daughter was my anchor, the reason I'd pushed through the darkness and emerged stronger. Fine, I said finally. Give me 5 minutes. I stepped into my office and called Daniel, my colleague and closest friend at the hospital. They're here. Walker and Lucia? Holy shit! Daniel's voice crackled through the speaker. Want me to call security? No, they're here about their kid. I have to see them. Harmony, you don't owe them anything. I know, but I took an oath. Walking into the waiting room felt like moving through molasses. Walker stood as soon as he saw me, still handsome in that effortless way that used to make my heart race. Now it just made me nauseous. Lucia sat clutching a small girl to her chest, her perfect features drawn with worry. Harmony, Walker started, taking a step forward. Thank you for... I held up my hand. Don't. This is strictly professional. Tell me about the patient. Lucia spoke up, her voice trembling. This is Remy. She's 5. She's been having severe recurring infections, and nobody can figure out why. I looked at the child in her arms, dark hair like her mother's, Walker's nose. She was pale, too pale, with dark circles under her eyes that no 5-year-old should have. Bring her to exam room 3, I said, turning on my heel. Bianca will get her vitals. As I waited for them to settle in, I gripped the edge of my desk until my knuckles turned white. The irony wasn't lost on me. They destroyed my life the day I became a mother, and now they needed me to save their child. My phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Rodriguez, my neighbor who watched Zoe after school. She's asking for pancakes for dinner, okay? I smiled despite everything. Sure, extra blueberries, I texted back. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my tablet and walked to exam room 3. Professional, detached. I could do this. The moment I opened the door, Remy started coughing, a deep, wet sound that made my doctor instincts kick in immediately. I moved forward, already reaching for my stethoscope. How long has the cough been this severe? 3 weeks, Walker said. It gets worse at night. I listened to Remy's lungs, frowning at the crackling sounds. Any fever? On and off, Lucia answered. The other doctors thought it was pneumonia at first, but the antibiotics aren't working. As I examined Remy, I could feel their eyes on me, desperate, hopeful, afraid. Part of me wanted to savor their fear, to make them feel a fraction of the helplessness I'd felt 5 years ago. But looking at Remy's frightened face, I knew I couldn't use an innocent child as a weapon for revenge. I'll need to run some tests, I said finally, stepping back. Comprehensive blood work, chest x-rays, and a few specialized screens. Whatever it takes, Walker said quickly. We'll pay anything. I met his eyes for the first time. Yes, you will. As I left the room to order the tests, my hands were steady. I had a choice to make. Help them and prove I was better than their betrayal, or turn them away and let them live with the consequences of their actions. Either way, karma had finally come calling, and I was holding all the cards. The test results for Remy came back 3 days later, and they weren't good. I stared at my computer screen, double-checking every value while Daniel looked over my shoulder. This is complicated, he said, pointing at several concerning markers in her blood work. I know. I rubbed my temples. I need to call them in. Want me to sit in? I shook my head. I need to handle this myself. 20 minutes later, Walker and Lucia sat across from my desk, holding hands. The sight made my stomach turn, but I kept my face neutral as I pulled up Remy's results. Your daughter's condition is serious, I began, turning my monitor so they could see. She has a rare immunodeficiency disorder that's causing her body to attack itself. That's why the infections aren't responding to standard treatments. Lucia's hand flew to her mouth. Oh, God. What's the treatment plan? Walker asked, his businessman voice taking over. The same tone he'd used when discussing our divorce settlement. She needs specialized immunotherapy, possibly a bone marrow transplant. I looked directly at them. And she needs it soon. How soon? Lucia's voice cracked. Weeks, not months. I pulled out a folder. I'm recommending immediate admission to start treatment. These are the consent forms. Walker reached for the papers, but I held them back. There's more. The treatment is experimental. Insurance won't cover most of it. Money isn't an issue, Walker said quickly. It's not just about money. I leaned forward. Remy will need constant monitoring. One of you needs to be here all the time. Your work, your social life, everything stops. We'll do anything, Lucia insisted. Please, Harmony. Don't, I cut her off. Don't act like we're friends. I'm Remy's doctor, nothing more. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Walker cleared his throat. We understand. When do we start? Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp. I handed over the forms. Don't be late. After they left, I called Mrs. Rodriguez. Can you keep Zoe overnight? I have an emergency case. Of course, honey. She and Maya are having a blast with their art project anyway. I worked late into the night, reviewing Remy's case and preparing the treatment protocol. Around midnight, a knock at my office door startled me. You're still here. Bianca walked in with 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need this. Thanks. I accepted the cup gratefully. Did you know Walker's company is one of our biggest donors now? He's on the hospital board. Is that going to be a problem? I laughed bitterly. Everything about this is a problem. You could refer them to another hospital, Bianca suggested. No one would blame you. Except me. I showed her Remy's file. She needs help now. Moving her would waste precious time. The next morning, I arrived early to find Walker already waiting outside my office. Alone. Where's Lucia? I asked, unlocking the door. Getting Remy settled in pediatric ICU. Can we talk? We're talking now. He followed me inside. I know this is difficult for you. You don't know anything about me anymore. I turned on my computer, avoiding his gaze. I deserve that. But Harmony, I need to know. Will this history between us affect Remy's treatment? The question hit like a slap. I stood up slowly, anger burning in my chest. Let me make something very clear. I may hate you and Lucia for what you did, but I would never, ever compromise a child's care, especially not a 5-year-old girl who had no choice in her parents' actions. I'm sorry, he said quickly. I didn't mean, yes, you did. And you know what? That says more about you than me. I grabbed Remy's chart. Now, if you're done questioning my professional ethics, your daughter needs her first treatment. In the ICU, Lucia was singing softly to Remy, who looked tiny in the hospital bed. The sight reminded me painfully of Zoe at that age, when she'd had her tonsils out. "Good morning, Remy," I said, putting on my doctor smile. "Ready to get started?" She nodded bravely, clutching a stuffed unicorn. "Dr. Harmony?" she asked in a small voice. "Will it hurt?" I sat on the edge of her bed. "A little bit, like a pinch. But you know what? I bet that unicorn gives excellent hugs during pinches." She giggled, then looked at her parents. "Daddy said you have a little girl too." I froze, shooting Walker a sharp look. He had the decency to look embarrassed. "Yes, I do," I said carefully. "Her name is Zoe. Can I meet her sometime?" The innocent question hung in the air like a bomb. Lucia made a choked sound, and Walker stepped forward protectively. "Sweetie, let's focus on getting you better first," he said quickly. I busied myself with preparing the IV line, my hands steady despite the emotional tornado inside. "Okay, Remy, big breath in. This medicine is going to help your body get stronger." As I started the treatment, I could feel Walker and Lucia's desperate hope radiating behind me. They had no idea that their worst nightmare was just beginning, and that I would be the one guiding them through it, for better or worse. A week into Remy's treatment, I was reviewing her charts when I heard raised voices from her room. I approached quietly, staying just outside the door. "You need to be here more," Lucia was saying, her voice tight with anger. "I can't do this alone." "The company needs me right now," Walker replied. "You know how important this merger is." "More important than your daughter?" "Don't start. I'm doing this for both of you." "Like you did it for Harmony and Zoe?" The silence that followed was deafening. I stepped away from the door, but not before hearing Walker's response. "That was different. You know why I had to leave." Had to leave? That was new. I'd never gotten a real explanation for why he'd abandoned us that day. Later that afternoon, I was checking Remy's vitals when Lucia returned from the cafeteria. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, matching her daughter's. "How's she doing?" Lucia asked, settling into the chair beside the bed. "Her numbers are improving, but slowly." I adjusted Remy's IV. "Where's Walker?" "Board meeting." Lucia's laugh was hollow. "Some things never change, right?" I kept my focus on Remy's monitors. "I wouldn't know." "You do, though." Lucia's voice dropped. "He hasn't changed at all. Still putting work first, still keeping secrets." Before I could respond, Daniel appeared in the doorway. "Dr. Benson, got a minute?" Grateful for the interruption, I followed him out. But instead of discussing a case, he pulled me into an empty consultation room. "You need to see this," he said, pulling up a file on his tablet. I was reviewing Remy's family history, and something doesn't add up. I leaned in to look. "What do you mean?" "The genetic markers for her condition. They're not matching Walker's profile the way they should." My heart skipped. "Are you suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything yet, but we need more detailed genetic testing." I sat heavily in a chair. "If Walker's not—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "Like I said, we need more tests." Daniel touched my shoulder. "You okay?" "I need to talk to Lucia." I found her in the hospital chapel that evening, after Remy had fallen asleep. She didn't seem surprised to see me. "I was wondering when you'd come," she said, not looking up. "We need to run more genetic tests on Remy." "Because you found something in her blood work?" Lucia's voice was resigned. "Something about Walker?" I sat beside her in the pew. "What's going on, Lucia?" She was quiet for so long, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "Did you ever wonder why I betrayed my best friend? Why I helped destroy your marriage? Every day for 5 years. Walker told me if I didn't help him leave you, he'd expose something that would destroy my family." She finally met my eyes. "Something about my brother." "Your brother? The one who died?" "He didn't die in a car accident." Lucia's hands trembled. "Walker helped cover up what really happened. He used that to control me, to make me play along with his plan." My head spun. "What plan? What really happened to your brother?" A noise at the chapel door made us both turn. Walker stood there, his face dark with anger. "What are you doing?" he demanded. Lucia stood, suddenly fierce. "What I should have done 5 years ago, telling the truth." "Don't be stupid," he warned. "Think about what you're risking." "I'm already risking everything," she shot back. "Our daughter is sick, and you're still playing your games." I stepped between them. "Walker, I think you should leave." "This is none of your business, Harmony." "Actually, it is. I'm Remy's doctor, and I need to know her full medical history, including who her real father is." The color drained from his face. "What?" "The genetic markers, Walker. They don't match." Lucia made a small broken sound. "I tried to tell you." "Shut up!" Walker's composure cracked. "Both of you, just shut up." "Security to the chapel," I spoke clearly into my phone. "Now!" Walker backed away, pointing at Lucia. "Remember what's at stake. Remember what he did." After he left, Lucia collapsed onto the pew, sobbing. I sat beside her, my mind reeling from the revelations. "Lucia," I said quietly, "I need to know everything, not for me, but for Remy." She wiped her eyes. "It's such a mess. I never wanted to hurt you, Harmony. You were my best friend." "Then prove it. Tell me the truth." She took a shaky breath. "It started 6 years ago, when my brother came to Walker for help." As she began her story, I realized that the betrayal I'd lived with for 5 years was just the surface of something much darker. And somewhere in this web of lies and manipulation was the key to helping an innocent little girl who deserved better than all of us. "Wait," I interrupted. "Start from the beginning. Tell me exactly what happened the day my daughter was born." "My brother Marcus was driving drunk that night," Lucia began, her voice barely above a whisper in the chapel. "He hit someone, a young woman. She didn't make it." "What does this have to do with Walker?" I asked, though dread was already pooling in my stomach. "The woman was the daughter of Walker's biggest business rival. He saw an opportunity." Lucia's hands twisted in her lap. "He helped cover up Marcus's involvement, made it look like a hit and run by an unknown driver, but he kept all the evidence." "Blackmail?" "Yes. He used it to pressure Marcus into making bad investments, draining our family's money into Walker's companies. When Marcus threatened to confess, there was an accident." She made air quotes with trembling fingers. "The car crash that supposedly killed him? Marcus is alive, in a private care facility in Mexico. Walker pays for everything, his care, his silence." I felt sick. "And the day Zoe was born? Walker called me to his office that morning, said he needed me to help him leave you." Lucia's eyes filled with tears. "He threatened to expose Marcus, to stop paying for his care, said he'd make sure my brother spent the rest of his life in prison." "So you helped him abandon his pregnant wife? Your best friend?" The old anger rose in my throat. "He had it all planned. The timing, the story we'd tell, everything. Said it had to be that day because—" She stopped. "Because what?" "Because you'd be too focused on the baby to contest the divorce terms he'd drawn up." Lucia looked away. "He wanted full control of the company assets before the merger." I stood up, needing to move. "The merger that's happening now? The one he's been in meetings about?" "With the same company as before. The dead woman's father's company." Lucia's voice cracked. "He's finally getting what he wanted all along." The chapel door opened, and Daniel stepped in. "Harmony, Remy's asking for her mom." Lucia wiped her eyes and hurried out. I stayed behind, my mind racing. "You okay?" Daniel asked. "I need you to do something for me." I pulled out my phone. "I need everything you can find about a fatal hit and run from 6 years ago. The victim was connected to Meridian Technologies." "The company that's merging with Walker's firm?" Daniel frowned. "What's going on?" "Justice, I hope." I showed him the notes I'd taken. "And I need those additional genetic tests on Remy. Today." Later that night, I was reviewing Remy's latest results when Walker appeared in my office doorway. "We need to talk," he said, "about how you killed your business rival's daughter, or about how you blackmailed my best friend into helping you abandon me during childbirth." He closed the door. "You don't understand the complexity of—" Oh, I understand perfectly. I stood up. You're a sociopath who destroyed multiple lives for a business deal. I did what was necessary. His voice hardened. And I'll do what's necessary now. Are you threatening me? I'm reminding you that patient confidentiality works both ways. Anything you learn about Remy's parentage stays private, or your medical license. Save it. I pulled out a folder. These are Remy's latest test results. Want to know something interesting? The genetic markers that don't match you? They match Thomas Rivera. Walker's face went white. What? Lucia's brother's best friend. The man she was dating before you forced her to help you. I smiled coldly. Guess she had her own secrets. You're lying. DNA doesn't lie. But you do, don't you? About everything. I moved closer. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over full custody of Remy to Lucia, with generous support payments. You're going to continue paying for Marcus's care. And you're going to stay away from my daughter. Or what? Or I send these results to Meridian Technologies. I'm sure they'd be interested to know the man they're merging with covered up their daughter's death. He stepped toward me menacingly. You wouldn't dare. Try me. I held my ground. I'm not the same woman you left 5 years ago. You can't bully me anymore. I'll fight this. Good luck. A paper trail of blackmail, conspiracy to cover up manslaughter, possible murder. I shrugged. And now medical proof that you've been lying about being Remy's father. How's that merger looking? The door opened and Daniel walked in with 2 security guards. Everything okay in here? Walker looked between us, his composure cracking. This isn't over. Actually, I said, it is. Security will escort you out. Don't come back unless it's to sign those papers. After he left, Daniel touched my arm. You sure about this? I looked at the photo of Zoe on my desk, then at Remy's test results. Some things are worth fighting for. Truth, justice, protecting our children from monsters. Even if those monsters are their fathers? Especially then. I picked up my phone to call Lucia. It's time to end this, for all of us. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital to find Bianca waiting with a worried expression. Walker's in the boardroom with the hospital administrators, she said, and he brought lawyers. Already? I checked my watch. That was faster than expected. Should I be updating my resume? Bianca asked. Because if he's about to take over, he's not taking over anything. I headed for the elevator. Call Daniel and tell him to bring those files we discussed. In the boardroom, Walker sat with 2 suits on either side of him. Dr. Patterson, the hospital director, looked uncomfortable. Dr. Benson, he said as I entered. Mr. Benson has raised some serious concerns about... About what? I interrupted, setting down my files. About how I discovered his fraud? Or about how he's been using this hospital's board position to cover up his crimes? One of the lawyers cleared his throat. Those are serious allegations. They're not allegations. Daniel walked in, carrying a thick folder. They're documented facts, including police reports, financial records, and DNA evidence. Walker stood up. This is ridiculous. You can't. Sit down, I snapped. For once in your life, shut up and listen. To everyone's surprise, he did. I turned to Dr. Patterson. 6 years ago, a young woman named Maria Delgado was killed in a hit-and-run. The case was never solved, but I have proof that Walker helped cover it up to facilitate a business merger with the victim's father's company. That's preposterous, one lawyer started. Daniel dropped a file on the table. Signed statements from the investigating officer, who received mysterious payments through offshore accounts. Bank records showing those payments came from shell companies owned by Walker's firm. I continued. He then used evidence of the crime to blackmail several people, including Lucia Montgomery's brother, who was the actual driver. Walker's face had gone from red to pale. You have no proof. Wrong again. I pulled out my phone and played a recording. Lucia's voice filled the room, detailing everything she'd told me in the chapel. Dr. Patterson looked ill. Mr. Benson, is this true? It gets better, I said. He's been using his position on this hospital's board to access private medical records and manipulate patient care decisions to protect his interests. That's enough. Walker slammed his hand on the table. I'll have your license for this. No, you won't. A new voice came from the doorway. A tall man in a dark suit entered, flanked by two federal agents. But we will be having a long conversation about corporate fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Walker's lawyers exchanged panicked looks. Who are you? Walker demanded. Special Agent Marcus Thompson, FBI. The man smiled grimly. We've been building a case against you for months. Dr. Benson's evidence was the final piece we needed. I watched as Walker's carefully constructed world crumbled around him. The lawyers quickly gathered their things and fled, leaving him alone at the table. You've ruined everything, he said, looking at me with hatred. No, you did that yourself. I turned to Dr. Patterson. I assume the hospital will cooperate fully with the investigation? He nodded quickly. Of course. And Dr. Benson, I think we need to discuss your promotion to department head. After Walker was led away in handcuffs, I headed to Remy's room. Lucia sat by her daughter's bed, reading a story. Is it over? She asked when she saw me. Almost. The FBI wants to talk to you about Marcus. They're willing to offer immunity in exchange for your testimony. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Can they help bring my brother home? They already are. Agent Thompson said they've located the facility in Mexico. Remy stirred in her sleep, and Lucia smoothed her hair. What about her treatment? That's actually why I'm here. I sat down opposite her. I've contacted Thomas Rivera. Lucia's hand flew to her mouth. You found him? He's been working as a teacher in Oregon. When I told him about Remy's condition, he offered to be tested as a bone marrow donor immediately. Does he know that he's her father? Yes. And he wants to meet her when you're ready. Lucia broke down sobbing. I found myself moving to comfort her, the old instincts of our friendship surfacing despite everything. I'm so sorry, she whispered, for all of it. I was such a coward. Yes, you were. I pulled back. But you can make it right now, for Remy. My phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Rodriguez with a photo of Zoe showing off her science project. She looks just like you, Lucia said, glancing at the photo. She's everything good that came from that terrible day. I stood up. I have to go. Thomas will be here tomorrow for testing. Harmony? Lucia called as I reached the door. Thank you. Not for me, but for her. I looked at Remy, sleeping peacefully, then back at Lucia. Sometimes the best revenge is simply making sure the truth comes out. As I walked away, I felt lighter than I had in years. The past couldn't be changed, but the future, that was still unwritten. Thomas Rivera arrived exactly on time, looking nervous in his wrinkled button-down shirt. I met him in the hospital lobby, where he was clutching a small stuffed penguin. Dr. Benson? He stood quickly. Thank you for contacting me. I never knew. Lucia will be here soon, I said, leading him to my office. She's just getting Remy settled after her morning treatment. Remy! He tested the name. Does she look? She has your eyes, I said gently, and your dimples when she smiles. He sat heavily in the chair across from my desk. I always wondered why Lucia disappeared so suddenly. We were talking about getting married, and then... He shook his head. Walker threatened her, didn't he? Among others. I pulled out the consent forms for the bone marrow testing. But that's over now. Walker's being held without bail, and the FBI is unraveling his entire operation. A knock at the door interrupted us. Lucia stood there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Thomas, she whispered. He stood, still holding the penguin. Lucy! The nickname broke something in her, and she burst into tears. Thomas crossed the room in 2 steps and wrapped her in his arms. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I wanted to tell you. He said he'd hurt you if I did. Shh, it's okay. He stroked her hair. I'm here now. I slipped out quietly, giving them privacy. In the hallway, I found Daniel waiting. The media's starting to sniff around, he said. Walker's arrest is making waves. Let them sniff. We have nothing to hide anymore. The hospital board wants to meet with you this afternoon. Something about restructuring the pediatric department. I smiled. Good. I have some ideas about improving access for underprivileged families. Later that afternoon, I took Thomas to meet Remy. She was sitting up in bed, coloring a picture of a unicorn. Remy, Lucia said softly, there's someone special I want you to meet. Remy looked up, studying Thomas with curious eyes. He stepped forward and held out the penguin. Hi, Remy. I heard you like animals. She took the penguin, smiling shyly. Thank you. Are you a doctor too? No, I'm a teacher. I help kids learn about science and nature. I like science. Remy's face lit up. Dr. Harmony showed me my blood cells under a microscope yesterday. Thomas sat carefully on the edge of her bed. Really? What color were they? As they chatted about blood cells and penguins, I watched Lucia's face. She was glowing, looking at them together. My phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Rodriguez. Zoe wants to know if you'll be home for dinner tonight. Looking at the family reuniting in front of me, I made a decision. Actually, I said, I was wondering if you'd all like to have dinner at my house tonight. Zoe's been asking about Remy, and if you're feeling up to it. Remy's eyes widened. Can we, Mom? Please? Lucia looked uncertain. Are you sure? Yes. And surprisingly, I meant it. It's time. That evening, my kitchen was full of noise and life. Zoe and Remy sat at the counter, decorating cookies Mrs. Rodriguez had helped them bake. Thomas was telling them about the penguins he'd seen in Antarctica during his research days. Mom! Zoe called. Look at my cookie. It's a stethoscope like yours. I walked over and hugged her from behind. It's perfect, baby. Lucia stood by the sink, watching our daughters together. They look like they could be sisters. They're not, I said firmly, but maybe they can be friends. She nodded, understanding the boundary. Harmony, there's something else you should know about Walker. What now? The FBI found evidence that he's been embezzling from the hospital's charitable foundation. Millions meant for patient care, just gone. My hands clenched. That son of a… Mom! Zoe interrupted. Can Remy come to my birthday party next month? Please? I looked at the two girls, their faces hopeful and innocent. Despite everything their parents had done, they were just children who deserved a chance at happiness. If she's feeling better, and if it's okay with her mom and dad, I said, watching Thomas beam at being called Dad. And maybe, Lucia added quietly, we could all start fresh? Not as best friends again, but as parents who want better for their children than what we did to each other? I finished. She nodded. I thought about the past 5 years, about the anger that had driven me. Looking at our daughters laughing together, I realized that true healing might come not from revenge, but from breaking the cycle of hurt. Okay, I said. Fresh start, for them. The timer dinged, and more cookies came out of the oven. As we all gathered around to decorate them, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. The past couldn't be changed, but the future belonged to these two little girls. And maybe, just maybe, that was the best revenge of all. The day of Walker's arraignment arrived with a media circus outside the courthouse. I sat in the back row, watching him shuffle in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. All rise, the bailiff called. As the charges were read, fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement, accessory to manslaughter, I noticed Walker's shoulders slumping further with each count. The man who'd once towered over my life now looked small and pathetic. How does the defendant plead? The judge asked. Not guilty, Your Honor, Walker's new lawyer answered. A commotion at the courtroom door drew everyone's attention. Maria Delgado's father entered, supported by his wife. Their eyes locked onto Walker with 5 years of grief and rage. During the recess, Mr. Delgado approached me in the hallway. Dr. Benson? His accent was thick with emotion. Thank you for bringing this to light. My Maria, she deserved justice. I'm so sorry for your loss, I said, touching his arm. The FBI tells me you have a daughter too? When I nodded, he smiled sadly. Then you understand. A parent never stops fighting for their child. Back at the hospital that afternoon, I found Thomas sitting with Remy during her treatment. He was reading her a book about marine biology, complete with silly voices for each sea creature. And how's my patient today? I asked, checking her vitals. Better. Remy held up her arm. Look, I didn't cry when they put the needle in. That's because you're the bravest girl I know, Thomas said, kissing her forehead. Lucia appeared in the doorway. The bone marrow results came back. I pulled up Remy's chart on my tablet. Thomas is a perfect match. When can we do the transplant? Thomas asked immediately. We'll start the preparation protocol next week. I turned to Remy. Remember how we talked about the special cells in your body? She nodded. The ones that aren't working right? Well, your dad's cells are going to help fix them. Like when we replace the batteries in your toys. Will it hurt? You'll be asleep, Thomas assured her. And when you wake up, I'll be right here. Promise? Promise. He squeezed her hand. I'm not going anywhere. Later that evening, Daniel caught me in the cafeteria. Have you seen the news? Walker's trying to make a deal? I nearly choked on my coffee. What kind of deal? He's offering to return all the embezzled money, plus evidence about other corporate crimes, in exchange for a reduced sentence. The Delgados will never agree to that. They might not have a choice. The DA says the case is complicated, and with Walker's connections. My phone rang. Lucia's number. Turn on the news, she said when I answered. Marcus is making a statement. I rushed to the nearest waiting room with a TV. There, on every channel, was Lucia's brother, looking thin but determined as he faced the cameras. 5 years ago, I made a terrible mistake that cost an innocent young woman her life, he began. Walker Benson used that tragedy to manipulate and control multiple people, including my sister. Today, I'm here to tell the whole truth. Daniel whistled low. Well, there goes Walker's deal. I watched Marcus detail everything. The accident, Walker's elaborate cover-up, the blackmail, the threats. When he finished, he looked directly into the camera. To Maria Delgado's family, I'm deeply sorry. I will accept whatever punishment the court decides. And to my sister Lucia, forgive me for being a coward for so long. My phone buzzed again. A text from Zoe. Mom, can we visit Remy tonight? I made her a get-well card. Looking at my daughter's message, I thought about how different things might have been if Walker had succeeded in taking her away from me too. Instead, his schemes had finally caught up with him, and we were all free. I headed back to Remy's room, where I found her sleeping peacefully. Thomas and Lucia sat together nearby, their hands intertwined. I saw Marcus's statement, I said quietly. Lucia wiped her eyes. He called me after, said he couldn't live with the lies anymore. Like mother, like uncle, Thomas said gently. The transplant team wants to meet tomorrow morning, I told them. 8 a.m. We'll be there, Thomas said. All of us. As I left for the night, I passed the hospital's wall of donor plaques. Walker's name was already gone, replaced by a simple statement. Dedicated to truth, healing, and second chances. In the parking lot, I found Mr. Delgado waiting by my car. The prosecutor called, he said. With your evidence and Marcus's confession, Walker will serve at least 20 years. Is that enough? He looked up at the stars. Nothing will bring Maria back, but perhaps now we can all begin to heal. I thought of Remy and Zoe, of Thomas and Lucia, of Marcus finding his courage, and even of Walker facing consequences at last. Yes, I said. I think we can. The morning of Remy's transplant, I found her sitting up in bed, clutching her stuffed penguin and looking scared. Hey there, I said, sitting beside her. Ready for your special day? She shook her head. What if it doesn't work? Then we'll try something else. I squeezed her hand. But you know what? I think it will work. Want to know why? Why? Because you're the strongest person I know, and you have so many people fighting for you. As if on cue, Lucia and Thomas appeared with breakfast. Behind them came Zoe, carrying a handmade banner that read, "Go Remy." "I made it myself," Zoe announced proudly. "And look, I drew penguins." Remy's face lit up. "Can you hang it where I can see it?" While the girls chatted, I pulled Lucia and Thomas aside. "The procedure will take about 4 hours. Thomas, the harvest team is ready for you." He nodded, looking nervous but determined. "Whatever it takes. I'll stay with Remy," Lucia said, squeezing his hand. As we prepared for the procedure, Daniel knocked on the door. "Special delivery." He wheeled in a small TV cart. "Thought you might want to see this." On the screen, Walker stood in court as the judge delivered his sentence. 25 years for fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to manslaughter. The camera panned to the Delgado family, holding a photo of Maria. "Turn it off," Lucia said quietly. "Today isn't about him." She was right. Today was about healing, about moving forward. The transplant went smoothly. Thomas's cells were strong and healthy, just like his love for the daughter he'd only recently discovered. When Remy woke up, groggy but stable, we were all there. "Did it work?" she asked sleepily. "It's working right now," I told her, checking her vitals. "Your dad's cells are like tiny superheroes, helping your body get stronger." "Like the Avengers?" "Exactly like the Avengers." That evening, after Remy had fallen asleep again, I found Bianca organizing a celebration in the nurses' station. "The board approved your proposal," she announced, handing me a letter. "The new pediatric wing will focus on helping families who can't afford treatment. We're calling it the Delgado Memorial Wing," Daniel added. Maria's parents agreed to be on the advisory board. I looked around at my hospital family. Daniel with his terrible jokes, Bianca with her endless compassion, the nurses who'd supported me through everything. "Thank you," I said. "All of you." "Dr. Harmony?" Zoe tugged at my coat. "Can I show Remy my science project tomorrow? I did it on bone marrow." "Of course, baby." I hugged her close, breathing in her familiar scent. "You know what? I think Remy would love that." As night fell, I sat in my office updating patient files. A knock at the door revealed Thomas. "Got a minute?" He held up 2 coffee cups. "Lucia said you take it black." She remembered. I accepted the cup. "How are you holding up?" "Still processing." He sat down. "I missed 5 years of Remy's life because of Walker's schemes. But somehow, I can't bring myself to hate him anymore. Is that strange?" "No," I said. "Hate takes too much energy. Energy we need for better things." "Like healing? Like living." My phone lit up with a text from Mrs. Rodriguez. "Zoe insists on making get-well cookies for Remy. Kitchen's a mess, but she's so happy." Thomas smiled at the message. "Our daughters are something else, aren't they?" "They're everything we should have been," I agreed. "Honest, forgiving, brave." A commotion in the hallway drew us out. Remy's latest test results had come in, and they were better than anyone expected. Her body was accepting Thomas's cells perfectly. "Mom!" Remy called out when Lucia entered the room. "Dr. Harmony says I can go home soon." "That's right," I confirmed. "But you'll still need to visit me regularly. Think you can handle that?" "Only if Zoe can come too sometimes," she bargained, making everyone laugh. Looking at this makeshift family we'd created from the ashes of betrayal, I felt something settle in my heart. The past 5 years had shaped us all, but they didn't define us anymore. "Dr. Benson?" A nurse appeared with more test results. "The new protocols you implemented are showing amazing results in other patients too." I took the reports, thinking of all the families we could help now, all the children who would have a fighting chance. "You did it," Daniel said quietly beside me. "You turned pain into purpose." "We all did," I corrected him, watching Zoe show Remy her science project while their parents looked on proudly. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. Better at loving, better at forgiving, better at living. Walker had tried to break us all, but instead, he'd inadvertently helped us build something stronger than his lies ever were. The truth. And the truth was, we were all going to be okay.